listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
What's up out there? Hope you're well, and thanks for checking out my Straight to Video podcast. Today's guest I discovered one weekend in our 80s video shop, which we have over in Alverton, Derbyshire. Some customers came in and we were chatting, and they asked if I knew about a musician who went by the name of Bright Light, Bright Light. Straight away, some of you will know that as a reference to the film Gremlins, and I was told he was a massive 80s pop culture and horror fan, so immediately I was all interested. Bright Light is Welsh musician Rod Thomas, who now lives and works out in New York and is all set to release a brand new album, Enjoy Youth, on May 17th, but a brand new single, You Want My, is out now. I checked in with Rod to talk all about his amazing career touring with Elton John, living and working as an independent musician, but also lots of 80s pop culture and horror fun was shared in this chat. Whilst you're checking out Bright Light's music, be sure to hunt down the 2 cinematography EPs, which have some just spectacular cover versions of lesser known movie soundtrack songs. I can't get enough of them. As always, this Straight to Video podcast is proudly presented to you in association with Affinity Photo. Affinity Photo is an amazing piece of photo editing software, which I use all the time for graphic design. It's used to create the podcast episode artwork you see each week, and it's an extremely affordable alternative to other programs on the market. So please, if you can, check them out at affinity.serif.com. Alright, if you want to find out more about Rod and Bright Light's music, then head on over to brightlighttimes2.com. That's brightlightx2.com, and pre-order the new album, Enjoy Youth. But for now, please enjoy my Straight to Video chat with Rod Thomas, Bright Light. Doing it.
Yeah, how you doing?
I'm good, Rod. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Thanks for doing this for us. Very cool.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
You're based out in New York, where you've been living for just over 10 years now, I believe you've been out there.
Yeah, actually very close to 11 years, which is wild that it's been the longest I've lived anywhere now since home. So, yeah.
You'd spent some time living and working in London, I believe. But
yeah.
New York has to be a far cry from your hometown in South Wales.
Very. Well, I don't even have a town. I was from the middle of nowhere, a coal mining valley. Yes.
Like all of us, I guess, growing up watching America on TV. Could you ever imagine living out there creating music?
No. And I don't think I realized how many films were actually set in New York until I moved here. And then I was looking at, you're looking around when you're walking and seeing places for the first time. You're like, oh, wow, I've seen that. And I recognize that. And just so much of it, like the steam coming from the little grates on the roads, everything. It's just, I thought that was all just a movie set, and it's real.
Quite romantic in a way as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a sort of life moment to realize that I live in this place where all of these films were set. So many of the films that I loved growing up. And there's a really good energy here. So I really enjoy the fact that it keeps me buoyant and it keeps me alive and feeling creative because there's just so much going on.
Have you seen it change a lot in those last 10, 11 years? I mean, obviously there was the lockdowns and stuff like that, but have you seen many changes?
Yeah, I would say I have. A lot of the neighborhoods have changed a lot. So when I first moved in, I was in this area in Brooklyn, which was very quiet. On a film tip, actually, if you've seen the film Ghost, the murderer's apartment, that was the end of my block.
Wow.
The actual building was the end of my block. And that is now full of coffee shops and strollers.
Yeah, Brooklyn used to be like the rough area, like scary area.
Yeah, I mean, bits of it still are. Brooklyn is massive. I don't really know how to describe to people how huge Brooklyn is. But that particular area, it had a boom. And it's very different now. Lots of neighborhoods have shifted and changed. Lots of businesses have gone. Lots have opened up. So, in the way that the landscape generally changes, going under the Trump administration from Obama, there was a palpable change.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, that was not great. And yeah, you just notice things shift and change. New York has remained amazing, I will say, like throughout everything. It's still an amazing place to be. You can still find ways to survive here, which you can't in lots of other expensive cities. And yeah, it's great. I love it here so much.
Did you know anyone out in New York when you first visited or moved there, or what to expect?
I knew maybe like a handful of people. So when I moved here, I moved in with Del Markey from Scissor Sisters, who was a friend of mine. He has like a house and there was like a spare apartment on the ground floor that he would like let out to people. So I moved into that. It was very like friends set up. And then I had a few other friends, like 2 people from the UK moved here before I did, and a friend of a friend and someone I'd met through Dell, so there was like 5 or 6 people perhaps. But it really, really quickly became home and I loved it. And it was such a vibrant place and much easier to meet people than a lot of other cities because a lot of people come here.
Obviously, like from touring with like massive acts like legends like Elton John and Cher, you've had the chance to see a lot of the USA. Where are some of your other favourite places? Or have you just been pretty much in a van?
Favorite cities in America? I like Chicago. I like Seattle. San Francisco is a very problematic city. Like the homelessness. It's beautiful in some aspects, and the homeless problem is very terrifying to me. Like coming from the UK and going to San Francisco and seeing mass homelessness and mass mental illness where there's really no help for these people was kind of terrifying.
Is that becoming a bit of a West Coast thing then? Because everyone says how like LA and Hollywood are like getting really bad for homelessness.
Well, the weather is better, so you can feasibly live outside there, I think is the issue. I'm not putting the blame on the people who are homeless. I'm saying, like the lack of support for any kind of poverty or mental health needs is quite startling. So yeah, a wild experience there. Where else have I really liked? Maybe those are like my main ones that I've gone back to quite a few times. I'm not the hugest fan of LA. I like it to visit, but I don't think I could ever live there. I grew up somewhere where you had to have a car, and I don't want to live somewhere that you have to drive ever again.
You had like a year and a half out on the road with Elton, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Am I right that initially grew from like just a handful of supports and then you're invited to do more and more?
Yeah, it was meant to be, I think, 7 shows, and it ended up being 57. Yeah, it was really crazy. It was a handful of shows and the reception was so great that his team just kept me on and we just kept extending and extending and extending. And yeah, it was a really amazing experience. I didn't have any idea that would last so long.
Did you have to change your diary plans?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I had to get, visas and find bandmates and do all this kind of stuff. It was very like playing Tetris, making it all kind of match up. But it was just the most amazing experience. I can't believe that I actually got to do that. When people ask about it or when I tell people what I did, like pre-COVID or whatever, or they mention him, I'm like, oh, well, I spent quite a lot of time with him. Yeah, it's a wild chapter of my life.
It must be a massive learning and growing experience from a performer's point of view to go from clubs to learn to project to such a... Well, do you have to learn to project to such a big audience?
You do, yes. Not just vocally, but like physically, because, if you're playing small shows, you're used to being able to project your body and your face to a really small physical space of land. And then you have these giant arenas and your body language has to fill a space. So it was really amazing to have these shows which really helped me write songs that I thought could live in a different world from the small clubs that I was playing. And it helped me write songs that were maybe like a bit more optimistic or had like just a different energy. I wanted to write songs that felt like they could fill an arena. And then I wrote the choreography album. So it was very formative year and a half of my life and really helped me, I don't know, like push towards the next level, I guess.
Speaking of that, as in kind of like projecting on such a big stage, how does that reverse when you go back to a club? Are people like, holy shit, where's this guy been? And all of a sudden you've just got this massive like persona, do you think?
Yeah, I think people notice a big difference. It's interesting paring it back down to a smaller room because you do have a lot more confidence and you have a lot more fun on stage. I think what I really learned was not being as nervous as I was before and just learning to have a lot more fun with it. Because if you can do a gigantic room like that, then you have no issue really playing a smaller room. It was interesting exercise and like pushing through your own little mental blocks where you think, oh, I can't do this, or oh my God, what happens if, or, those kind of things. And you end up realizing that everyone's in the room to have a good time and the people that booked you believe in you. And honestly, it's the easiest thing in the world doing shows of that size because there's like catering and there's a team of sound people to help you put things together and break things down. And when you're doing it by yourself in a small club, you have to literally rush off stage and like you're pulling wires and you're trying to do stuff and things get lost.
I got to go park the van. I got to find somewhere to park.
Yeah, like all of that stuff is very hard to do sort of by yourself. So the larger scale shows made you realize like, oh, wow, it can be a lot more pleasant to do live shows. And then going back down to the small clubs, it is more intimate and it's actually in some ways a lot more fun because you're closer to the people and you can connect and you can fill the room a lot easier. So if you have more energy and the room is smaller, then it's like much more fun for everyone, I think.
Best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Going from those handful of shows to like that year and a half thing, that's such an organic and honest opportunity from Elton and his team. And it's so lovely to hear, especially as you're an independent artist. And he wasn't, I guess, they weren't swayed by, there must be like big labels like throwing money or bombarding them with offers. Can you put our band on this tour and all this kind of, they say, no, we want this guy because we like what he does. And that's fantastic because what with you being like so DIY and fiercely independent, it's very cool. Very, very cool.
Yeah. I mean, not many artists do that. Not many artists take a chance on somebody who's unsigned and is their own manager and everything. You know, what he did for me is something that you really wish that everyone with a position would do for anyone who is on a very different career or financial level than them. You know, what he did for me was absolutely life-changing, and I'm still not a top 10 artist, but the amount that I was able to travel in that period of time, the amount of money that I got paid per show was just like a billion times more than I was getting paid for playing small places. And, you know, I got to travel the world. I got to meet amazing people. I got to meet new bandmates. I got to change my perception of what I was capable of. I got to believe in myself in ways that I was not allowed to before and hang out with my friends. And, you know, it was just awesome. Like such a wild year and a half.
I mean, you're still independent. Are you kind of like just in the groove now, if that's how you operate when it comes to music? Recording, releasing, touring?
Do you mean versus being with a label?
A lot of people like they're constantly chasing like, oh, I need to get the record deal and all this kind of thing. But you've been doing the independent thing so long and been doing it so well. You're just kind of in the groove and just happy to pursue it in that way.
I'm going to be very transparent in that I have never been approached by a record label. I have been turned down by every single label that I've approached. I have been turned down by almost every single manager and anyone in the industry that I've approached to find a traditional model my entire career. Even when I was on tour with Elton John, even when I was on tour with Cher, even when I was on Graham Norton's show, even when I have a #1 dance album, nobody is interested in working with me in a traditional model, which is, you know, it is what it is. And I just don't like not getting things done. So I keep going and I make my work and I work with people and I create music in whichever way I find. Like, I'm not doing music to be famous. I'm doing music because I love making music and it's really the only thing I know how to do. So, you know, just being very transparent for any music creators that might be listening to the show. People are very clever these days at spinning that being independent is the new being signed and blah, blah, blah. And that's real horseshit, because the people that they quote as these success stories are people that were on major labels but are now independent. And so they had the marketing money, they had the power, they had the mailing lists, they had the spend and the presence and the push from a major label, which pushes you to a level which you cannot really achieve as an independent artist. So whilst these artists, I love them as well, like a lot of the people's like the Robins or the Pet Shop Boys or the Vanessa Carltons or anybody that is touted as a fiercely independent, brilliant artist, they're all amazing. It's not the same as any of you guys trying to carve everything out by yourself. And it's just a different reality, you know, but it is hard. And you might think that I maybe get things on a plate, or you might think that I'm turning labels down because being independent is better. That's not the reality. The reality is I just like making music and I just get things done because I don't like watching time fly by with nothing happening. And I'm a firm believer in, if you want to do something, just try. And I have tried and I've made stuff happen, and I've achieved stuff that labels haven't when they've put hundreds of thousands of pounds into artists. And I don't know why that means that I'm still not good enough for them, but it does. And fine, great. If you don't think I'm an interesting artist, that's great. Don't waste your time, and I won't waste my time on you. And that's a really easy line in the sand. And I'll just keep going and I'll keep working with people and keep doing everything I want to do. And I'm aware that the reach that I have without a label is very minimal, you know, like in terms of what you could achieve if you had the money behind you. I'm aware that there's like a ceiling that I can't smash through every single time I do an album release. Similar to like if you're making an independent film and you see, you know, a lot of our like video nasties or video classics, where if you'd had a slightly bigger budget or like a bigger marketing push, they could have become a bit more than a cult classic. I feel like I'm the sort of B-movie of the pop world. And I'm very, very, very close to being something that would be in like a major cinema release, but I'm not there.
Being your own artist on your own label, you're always the #1 priority. So that's one good thing.
But I'm also the biggest pain.
You've just dropped a new single, You Want My, with the new album, Enjoy Youth, coming on May 17th, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Am I right that the new album, like previous releases, was crowdfunded?
No, none of them were crowdfunded. I did do a fundraiser to help offset PR costs.
Right, okay, gotcha.
The last album, because it was sort of COVID time, I did special bonuses to like help raise a little bit of extra money for music videos and things like that. But the albums are not crowdfunded, no.
Is it humbling, though, when you go into each new project and you can get contributions from fans that help go to important things like that? That must be really, really cool.
It's amazing to me that anybody is willing to put their money into a creator, whether that's me or a filmmaker or a charity or whatever. It's amazing because nobody owes you that. And it's amazing the people that I've met on my travels over the last couple of years and people that have come to shows and I see their name pop up on like a little Patreon thing or a donations or whatever. It's really amazing to think that these people will spend any amount of their earnings, especially in the current political climate, the current financial climate. It's wild that people are able to allocate that little part of their savings to me. It's amazing and it's never, ever, ever taken for granted.
And especially like sometimes something that doesn't even exist yet.
Exactly. Like I've paid for 15 different Kickstarters over the last 5 years. Not one of them was finished. That's fine. I would actually rather the creator have that money and do whatever they need to in whatever time scale. Some of the things like a film or a more adventurous project is much harder to complete and more costs come up the closer you get towards the end. So totally fine with paying for that, you know, like a £5, a £20, a £50, whatever. It's an interesting thing that people are willing to pay for something that hasn't been made yet.
Yeah. The new single, it's backed, well, on Spotify, it also features your song Down to One. That had a great horror-themed video with some cool nods to The Burning and April Fool's Day in there as well. Did you enjoy putting all that together?
I did. That's the most fun I've ever had making a music video. So Tyler Jensen, who I created the video with, he made the Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street documentary that came out a couple of years ago. We've been friends for a really long time now, maybe like 6 or 7 years. And we did all the videos for the last album together. But I really wanted to do a horror-themed video. And so we kind of brainstormed our favorite horror films that we could reference and recreate and like make a loving homage to. And we had the absolute most fun over those 2 days that we spent filming it. Most of the cast were in an indie film that came out last year or 2 years ago called Death Drop Gorgeous. And they've just done Saint Drogo, which came out this year. So they're a US company. So it's been in the film circuit. So probably harder to look at outside of North America. But we had an amazing time making that music video. I would love to just recreate those 2 days again.
You released it around Halloween last year, I believe.
We released it on Friday the 13th of October.
That's like a double hit right there.
Yep.
Had you been waiting for the right opportunity to do a horror vibe video? Because, I mean, you touched on it a little with the Cry It Films promo, which had some elements of Scream, but Down to One just kind of goes all out.
Yeah, I was waiting for the right opportunity. And then when I realized that there was the Friday the 13th in October, I was like, well, there you go. How
well ahead of the game was you? When did you start shooting it or come up with the idea?
We actually didn't manage to shoot it until maybe like 3 weeks before it came out.
Shit.
So yeah, it was very tight. We've been planning it for a while, but you know, people's schedules change. And I was also on tour in the UK that month as well. So it was like making sure that the dates were all done, that I got back in time, that there was no COVID after the shows, like all these nonsense little things that you have to think about now. But yeah, it was a rush, but a fabulous tidal wave of emotions and creativity, and then we got it done. So yeah, I'm super proud of that one.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Anyone who scans through your social media will see how much of a fan of horror and just pop culture in general you are. Do you remember what your like first ever introduction to horror was growing up?
Do you know what? I don't. I'm assuming that it was probably Gremlins, because Gremlins was like cute enough, but was also horror. I'm assuming that it was that. Or it would be something like Erie, Indiana on TV.
Nice.
Maybe. Most horror fans do have a first memory. Yeah, I truly don't have a first horror memory, I think, because I was such a big consumer of like film and TV as a kid. I'm an only child that grew up in a coal mining valley. So like the only outreach that I had was television, and my parents loved watching films. We used to watch stuff together, but I truly can't remember what the first horror film was.
Did you discover a lot of films on video? Or I'm wondering, like, you became a teenager in the 90s. So was it like the teen horror revival of like Scream and Final Destination and I Know What You Did Last Summer?
No, it was before that.
Right.
So yeah, we had a couple of video shops in the villages near my closest town. And we used to go there all the time. So every week we'd go and rent videos for the weekend. I very specifically remember seeing the giant cardboard cutouts of like Pinhead from Hellraiser, Kathleen Turner and Serial Mom. And I remember just being very fascinated by the artwork on the VHS. You know, that was so fun to try and see which would be the coolest movies because of the way that they were presented. And we all know that that was smoke and mirrors because half of them was shit.
Always like to say the golden rule, if there's no photos on the back, it ain't going to be nothing like what's on the front.
Exactly, yeah.
That's one big lie right there.
Yeah, I learned a lot through the video stores, and it was really fun to have a sort of archive, you know, to go through and at your own pace look at stuff. Like the cinemas near us didn't have that many screens, so there weren't that many films out each week. Quite often, week after week, it would be like the same films. I remember I went to see like Hocus Pocus like 6 times and Cool Runnings, I think 6 times because nothing else was really changing in the cinema at that point. Yeah, the video shop was a godsend.
You've pimped out a lot of like old school stuff. Films like Pieces, Demons, and you love the Vamp movie.
I love the Vamp movie, yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Was they all like video releases or perhaps films you've found in more recent years from like recommendations?
So Vamp was something I watched with my parents as a kid. I don't know how on earth we managed to watch that. I mean, I thought Grace Jones was a vampire as a child, and I thought that was really cool. Like, I was obsessed with vampires, obsessed with Dracula. I used to wear a cape all the time. And then when I realized that Grace Jones was actually like a singer and a model and a real person, I was like, oh, wow. I thought she was just
Gets
like
even
a
better.
character, yeah. The other ones were later discoveries.
Yeah, Pieces is a weird one.
Yeah, Pieces is a very weird one. Like, the whole Giallo segment was a more recent discovery, like the last 5 or 6 years. Yeah, there was no access to them there. But I had like a few friends in university who were film students. So then we'd kind of share films, and I did a little film course to see some like, you know, classics and weirder genres that wouldn't have seen otherwise. So it was a little bit more pedestrian or obvious or available stuff when I was sort of young and then a teenager. And then especially during COVID, it was like deep diving back into making lists of 80s horror that I hadn't seen, or 70s horror, or B movies. Me and the Death Drop Gorgeous guys, we have like text chains of like, what is the worst film you've ever seen? And then we'll sit down and watch those. And, you know, Pieces is obviously one of those bad, good films.
Definitely. You released the brilliant cinematography EP in 2016, which people really need to check out with your movie soundtrack covers. How did you choose the right songs for that?
Oh, I was trying to think of films that really resonated with me when I was making that album. So a lot of the songs on Choreography are inspired by scenes from films. So I tried to pick songs from those films, or at least films that were very pivotal to me as a child, you know, like formative years. So like Mannequin. I mean, The Raccoons was a TV show, but, you know, it had a kicking soundtrack.
Oh, yes.
I forget what else I covered now, to be honest. But yeah, it was like films that I remember having a specific impact on me, whether that was the film itself or the artwork. And something that like made my imagination run wild when I first came into contact with that film.
I mean, you must be one of, well, you've got to be the only artist that has a song inspired by a scene from Alien Resurrection.
Yes.
Got to be.
I would imagine so, yeah. And I will defend that film until the day that I die. I went to see that desperately underage in Swansea at the Odeon. There were 5 of us in the cinema, and the cinema was like a 200-person room. It was massive. And then the 5 of us were just sat there watching Alien Resurrection, and I loved every second of it. I think it's iconic.
Sigourney Weaver's like total badass in that one. That's like great.
Yep.
That EP featured an excellent cover of Alicia's Do You Dream About Me from Mannequin. Mannequin's obviously a big film for you. What are your memories of that, and what like attracted you to it?
That it's just outrageously gay.
Character of Hollywood's one of the greatest ever.
Fabulous. The period of time where there were like shopping malls is so magical and so nostalgic. We didn't have like malls in Wales, obviously, but like, you know, the shopping centres that you had probably in like Nottingham or whatever. There was a big shopping centre in Cardiff, and there was a small shopping centre in Swansea that I used to go to. I think it's still there, but you know, it's not quite the same. And just the idea of like a shopping mall and like thinking about, oh, I'd never thought about the fact that people choose what the things wear in the windows, and that was like an art form, not just hanging a sad dress on like a piece of plastic. the imagination behind it and the artistry and the fantasy world was so cool to me. Like I really wanted to be a window dresser for a long time, but I didn't think I would ever be good enough to do that. You know, for me, that was like one of the coolest professions you could have. Mannequin just made me dream in a way about mundane things that made me see magic in really normal scenarios.
I've never seen Mannequin on the Move.
I haven't either. I didn't want to. I wasn't interested. It wasn't Kim Cattrall. I don't care.
It's like the Lost Boys sequels. I've seen them, but they don't really exist.
Yeah, they don't really exist, do they? No.
You also did, I'm glad you mentioned it earlier, you did a brilliant cover of Touch Me from Freddy's Revenge, and I didn't realise it was Tyler who worked on the Scream Queen documentary. Freddy's Revenge, it's become such a really important film in recent years.
It has, yeah. What are your thoughts on the film?
Well, back in the day, it was always one of my favourite of the whole saga. Then you kind of get a bit twisted by it, or it doesn't play by the rules and all this kind of stuff. But now I absolutely love it. And I have my way of looking at it in the fact that people say, oh, it doesn't play by the rules and all that Freddy comes into real life and all this kind of stuff. And I say that the whole film is seen through Jesse's eyes. So when you see Freddy in real life, that's just Jesse doing the killing. That's the way I see it. But I'm a big Robert Russell fan who's also in Vamp.
Oh, yeah, he's so hot.
He's one of the coolest. Have you ever met him? I met him at a convention some years ago.
I haven't met him, no. We follow each other on Instagram, I think. But no, I was obsessed with him as a kid. Like Vamp. Oh my God, what else did I see him in?
Weird Science.
Yeah. He's just like the hot douche in like so many films. And like, what an amazing guy.
I got to meet him and I always imagine he's going to be like quite, not a nasty guy, but almost like a villainy kind of person, but he's just uber cool. I was like, oh, this is just the best.
That's good to know. That's really good to know.
How did you and Tyler meet up? Had he already done the Scream Queen documentary when you met?
Oh, we've just known each other from being gay in New York since 2014, probably, and just became friends and then just decided to do work together. He wanted to use my clever version of Touch Me in the documentary, but we couldn't get the clearance for it. So he just used one of my originals. So then after that, we started to work up on music ideas together and did music videos.
What impact did the film have on you?
To be very honest, it wasn't my favorite in the franchise. I definitely appreciate it, and I really like the fact that it is different from the others, but it's not my favorite in the franchise.
That opening scene is still just iconic horror.
There are so many amazing moments in it, but I think as a whole, it doesn't get me in the way that the others do.
Which is your favorite, can I ask?
Controversially, A New Nightmare, I think, is amazing because I love the revisiting of it. I just love Heather Langenkamp. I think she's amazing. I think it's that one. And then a real toss-up between 3 and 4.
Okay.
I love 3 and 4 so much. I think they're so cool. Yeah, maybe 3 or A New Nightmare. I think are my two absolute favorites. Whilst I do like most of them, I love the first 4 and New Nightmare especially, but 3 and New Nightmare I think are my favorites.
Yeah, I have a soft spot for 5 though.
Is that the Dream Child?
Yeah, always worth revisiting every now and again.
Oh, yeah, it's great. There's none that I don't like, but those are my favorites.
I heard you, I've seen that you have like a very unique way of organising your vinyl collection. I know you're a big vinyl collector. It's all in moods and styles and legends and things like that. How do you organise your VHS collection?
Same.
Really?
Moods and styles. So I have like Fabulous Evil Women row. I have the sort of like 80s trash horror. I have blockbusters, sci-fi. I'll have like a Giallo section, a sort of like camp section, which is like True Beverly Hills, Outrageous Fortune kind of thing, music video section, and then like suspense and horror, which is like a lot of Hitchcock videos that I've got. Yeah, it's like moods, and just where if I'm like feeling a certain type of way and I want to look at a film, I kind of know what world it's in. It's just easier than like alphabetical. You just have to keep rearranging every time you buy a new video, and I just don't have the patience.
Or by label and all that kind of thing. All the Warner Brothers together and all that kind of stuff.
No, it's all about moods really. So the records is like disco, Fabulous Women, queer stuff, soundtracks. I have like a Scandinavian section, which kind of encompasses cardigans and Kings of Convenience and things like that. So yeah, it's just how I think about stuff in my brain, really. I try and replicate in the shelves.
Superb. Have you found anywhere in New York that still stocks VHSs?
There are a few places, yeah. They're not as loving with them. There's a place called The Thing in Greenpoint, which has like a hodgepodge of redundant media. And then Generation Records in West Village has a lot of VHSs. Most of them are kind of like middle of the road ones, but there are a lot there. And I did find a couple of gems in that.
Rod, I'll end with a question I ask everybody. I want you to time travel a little to a Friday night in the late 80s or early 90s and you head into the video store. What movie soundtrack do you have on the Walkman and what 3 tapes are you going to rent for the weekend?
Right. Well, I did actually put a few tapes by me for this. On the Walkman, it's the Transformers, the movie soundtrack.
Oh, Stan Bush and Lion.
Yeah, Stan Bush. I love that soundtrack so much. I think it's one of the coolest soundtracks. Very unexpected from a Transformers movie as well, like super cool.
Did you see the Transformers film back in the day?
Yeah, I did. I used to watch it absolutely all the time. I was obsessed with Transformers. It's one of my favorite films ever. It's so good. And, you know, it's very sad as well. Like, it's very emotional.
Some top names doing the voices as well. It's ridiculous.
Okay, so 3 videos. We'll begin with Hellraiser.
The original.
Iconic. Absolutely iconic. I prefer Hellbound, to be honest, but I don't have that.
It's very quotable, Hellbound is.
Yes. We'll go with Gremlins 2, a new batch.
Have you seen the Key and Peele brainstorming sketch about Gremlins 2?
No.
Oh, I'll send you the link to it. Oh, it's incredible.
And then the third one, we'll do Return to Oz.
Now you're talking my language right there.
Yeah.
It's such a great film.
One of the best films ever made, I think. Horrifying. Genuinely one of the most terrifying films to me as a child. Everything from, like, you know, horrific electroshock therapy, like beyond dark, beyond horrifying, and The Wheelers.
Disney made some weird shit back in the day.
They really did make some weird shit, yeah.
Have you seen Something Wicked This Way Comes?
Yes.
That's a creepy as hell Disney film as well.
Very creepy. I mean, I don't remember if it was Disney or if it was MGM or something, but Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, the child catcher.
Yeah.
Genuinely, like, having a pedophile collecting children. You know, like, what? We used to watch that as a kid, and like, the child catcher is a horrifying in every single. There is nothing you would never be able to have a child catcher in this day and age.
It's like all those freaky 70s and 80s safety commercials. We're just going to terrify the kids.
Yeah. Wild. Absolutely wild. So yeah, those are my 3 little. I feel like they work.
That's a movie night right there.
Yeah, it is a movie night. Yeah, so hopefully those were a decent pick.
Rod, I've kept you for too long. I appreciate it. You got an upcoming record preview show on the 5th of February, I believe, in New York.
I do in New York, yes. I'll be making my way back to the UK at some point soon as well. There'll be a couple of shows around the record release, May, June time. But yeah, it's nice to be doing music again. This one is a little bit less horror influenced, but there are still some film Easter eggs throughout the album campaign, so get ready for those.
Nice one. Been lovely to chat.
Thank you for having me.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Thanks a million to Rod Thomas, Bright Light, for joining me on today's Straight to Video podcast. The new album, Enjoy Youth, lands on May the 17th and can be pre-ordered now from brightlighttimes2.com. In the meantime, there's a whole host of cool stuff to check out, and I know listeners to this show will love his horror and movie-inspired music videos, so please dive in and have a watch. As it's Valentine's Day this month, we're having a special Valentine's-inspired theme night over at our 80s video shop in Alton, Derbyshire, with a Pretty in Pink theme. As many of you know, I love all things John Hughes, so if that's your thing, there's a few tickets left over at www.80svideoshop.co.uk, and I think I've mentioned some announcements about the shop which should be coming in the next week or so please keep posted on all the at 80s Video Shop social channels to be the first to hear it. So that's all for this episode, but I will be back next Friday, so until then, always be kind, please rewind and unwind, and I'll speak to you all real soon.